The Wild Robot is arguably the best DreamWorks film of the last few years. Although maybe that's because ever since Puss in Boots 2, they've released 4 other movies, and the only one that was moderately well received was Orion in the Dark, which nobody talks about. A fate that could have also happened to the Wild Robot, since it is admittedly a pretty familiar premise. An unfeeling AI gets paired up with a living creature, and through interacting with it learns to care about it. It's a fairly common sci-fi trope, and something that you really need to put an interesting spin on if you want a story to stand out.
I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
This is something that The Wild Robot does terrifically by pairing up that formula with interesting themes and world building that both feed into each other and make the story feel fresh again. The funny thing is that despite how effective the world building is, it's actually very minimal in how it's presented. The movie begins with a helper robot, Roz, fresh out of the box and washed up on an island with no idea how she got there and very little understanding of the outside world beyond her manufacturer, Universal Dynamics, and their programming for her to complete tasks.
A Rosm always completes its task. Just ask.
In trying to find a task to complete, Roz discovers a baby gosling which she takes to call him Bright Bill and takes on the task of teaching him to fend for himself before migration season comes. Throughout the first half of the film, while Roz essentially takes on a parental role for an animal, something not part of her normal programming, she starts having to think for herself and starts to see herself as Bright Bill's mother.
I have a kid.
While this is going on, Roz also has the eventual pre-programmed task of reporting back to Universal Dynamics due to unsuccessful delivery, but then starts to question things. The thought of leaving behind this home that she's helped to build, not just for Bright Bill, but for herself and her companion Fink, makes her wonder, why does she need to obey her programming when she's learned so much from ignoring it? It would be a shame to abandon everything in favor of her point of origin, where the only information she has is based on the scripts that point of origin has programmed her to say about how great they supposedly are.
Every need has been anticipated, no detail overlooked.
Who says you need to leave?
I am not sure. Them, I guess.
This ultimately results in Roz choosing to stay on the island and being more than what her programming dictates, while Bright Bill goes on his migration into the outside world where Roz actually came from. It's at this point that we see that the outside world that Universal Dynamics advertises isn't quite so ideal as it seems. This ambiguously distant future has been devastated by climate change, and much of civilization has been destroyed and abandoned. The only humans we do see outside of Universal Dynamics' happy little marketing are only ever shown working and literally strapped into the lifeless technology that Roz used to be a part of. The movie is really good at getting across its world building quickly. We only ever get to see what remains of human society for a few minutes of the movie's runtime, putting us in perspective of Roz and the animals who are distant outsiders of it, but it gives us just enough information to give us a basic understanding and leave us to figure out the rest for ourselves. Universal Dynamics' advertising conveys this idea that their technology has created this utopian civilization where people can be happy together while their robots solve all their problems. In reality, when we finally do see the outside world, it's in a state of ruin. No humans are ever shown properly living their lives, and the only representation we get of this world is the mega corporation Universal Dynamics itself. And if this one company is all that is apparently of note about this world, what does that say about the level of control they have over it and the condition that world is in? This society's reliance on technology hasn't created a perfect civilization like what Universal Dynamics promises. Instead, it only seems to have fostered a system based on control over and indifference towards the world around it. And that can be seen from the other types of robots the company produces. While the robots designed for the general public are made to at least feign friendliness, behind closed doors when something poses a potential threat to their business, such as a flock of geese accidentally stumbling into a greenhouse, the robots they send in are much more destructive, coming in guns blazing to eradicate the problem, completely apathetic to the lives they're taking. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I can see how this would tie back into the main plot. Roz begins the story as this invention of an evil corporate entity, cursed with the same lack of compassion or humanity that it has, but then is exposed to the natural world and the passion for life that comes with it. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. The forest contains a lot of beauty and kindness that Roz learns to take after, and in taking care of Bright Bill alongside Fink, they do start to form sort of a happy little family. Not to mention, the island contains a couple of other friendly allies that help them along the way. The help on this island is few and far between, with most of the animals being vicious little things. All throughout the movie, they're hostile to any species different from their own, including and especially Roz.
Are you here to kill us?
Negative. I am here to help with whatever task you...
Says no!
So while human society has clearly decayed to a much worse state, the animal kingdom also isn't without its problems. And this is an important distinction because we spend the first half of this movie exclusively on this island, surrounded by a lot of vaguely unpleasant to outright deadly characters where even the death of a mother's own child is just something she's used to.
As a mother of 7. 6 babies.
And then once we get off the island and see just how bad things have become in the new world, it serves as a warning for what could happen to the animals. While Bright Bill is on migration, Roz and Fink remain back home to brave the harsh winter snow. But while they've got the shelter to survive, a lot of the other island's inhabitants aren't so lucky. Now, after spending the last few months putting up with crap from the other animals, Roz and Fink, if they wanted, could just leave those animals out there to die. In fact, Fink is initially in favor of it.
Are you sure about this? We could have the whole island to ourselves come spring.
Roz, however, can't bring herself to do that, and the two take everyone into their home despite how hostile everyone is to both them and each other. At first, it goes about as well as you'd expect, with every animal there at each other's throats. That is until Fink, inspired by Roz's selflessness, convinces everyone to call a truce until the weather clears, even if it's only to survive.
First one that walks out that door is dead, and if we can't keep it together in here, everyone's dead.
And that truce ends up being a big first step to something greater. After winter passes, Universal Dynamics finally managed to track Roz down, approaching her with another one of their own robots.
I am Vantra, Virtual Observational Neutralizing Troublesome Retrieval Authority.
This is where Universal Dynamics are presented as their most insidious. All their marketing promising a bright future that doesn't exist is brought to its extreme with Vantra, a robot with a sickly sweet way of speaking, all while trying to abduct Roz and erase her memories and by extension her entire identity.
Despite my cheery demeanor, I am unfeeling, inflexible, and morally neutral.
Then when fake pleasantness doesn't work, Vantra resorts to burning the forest down and taking all the animals with it just to reclaim this one robot that didn't follow protocol. Unfortunately for Vantra though, the animals have already set a precedent for banding together in a crisis and all work to save themselves, the forest, and Roz, something that never would have happened had Roz and Fink not set an example for them over the winter, and something that the human race was apparently never able to do before it was too late. Not to mention that the climax pays off a detail that's been present throughout the movie. There's a beaver named Paddler who spends all of his days chipping away at the largest tree in the island. The other forest creatures consistently mock him for doing it, doubting that he can actually pull it off.
That's what happens to your brain when you eat wood, weirdo!
But in the climax, when the forest is on fire and the animals need to redirect the river with a dam, they not only encourage Paddler, but actively help him to do what nobody believed he could. The film ends with Universal Dynamics being pushed away from the island, albeit temporarily, and knowing that the corporations will only ever come back for Roz, she leaves the island to keep it safe, knowing that it's in a better place than she found it. The movie ends a little while later with the animals now comfortably living together and Fink telling a story about the fabled wild robot, pretending to read from Universal Dynamics' instruction booklet for Roz, but disregarding what it dictates she is in favor of her actual story, a metaphor for the plot of the movie as a whole.
Thought kindness was a survival skill. You know what? She was right.
Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed, Zelda, Moon Goddesses, Will, Blueberry Cello, and Seth M. Thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to see your name in the credits, along with early access to scripts and videos, as well as exclusive unused video thumbnails, or if you'd just like to chat with me, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. The link is in the description.